Never forget.
They may not be stories you want to remember, but they remain part of our history. History that helped shape and mold our justice system, how we raise our children, even how we see the world. In a three-part series of special reports only on KTTC, our Barrett Leone takes a look back at some of the state's most notorious killers and their crimes. Tonight, we start with a violent quadruple homicide. It happened right here in Rochester more than 33 years ago. Our Barrett Leone joins us in our studio, and she investigates the Brom murders. Barrett.
Well, Tom, Caitlin, when you think of notorious Minnesota crimes, the Brom murders are at the top of the list. For the first time, KTTC spoke with a close family friend of the Broms. If you've lived in Rochester long enough, you've heard the name.
This is him on his way to prison. This is the last time Rochester saw him.
Brom. You've probably read the headlines.
5 lives that are gone. I mean, they're literally gone.
Remember the reports.
The question Olmsted County authorities must decide now is whether to charge David Brom as a juvenile or as an adult.
And watch the Brom family murder story play out on national television.
Good evening. Topping tonight's News 11, police charge a 16-year-old boy with 4 counts of first-degree murder after his family is found axed to death in their Rochester home.
Patty Price lived it.
It was a crazy, awful experience.
In the middle of the night on February 18th, 1988, 16-year-old David Brom killed 4 of his family members. His parents, Bernard and Paulette, and younger siblings, 14-year-old Diane and 9-year-old Rick, all murdered with an axe.
I had only just been to their house for a sleepover the weekend before.
Price, an 8th grader at the time, remembers it vividly. Diane was her best friend.
I remember the day that she didn't show up. It was a Thursday, and she didn't show up that day, and I didn't really think that much of it.
She remembers her mother breaking the news to her that night.
I don't know how to tell you this, but Diane is dead. My life kind of was before that moment and then after that moment from that point on.
The next day, Price went to school alongside her classmates in a fog, even cleaning out Diane's desk with another friend.
I was convinced 100% that David was out. He had walked in on the murders and fled.
Before David turned himself in that Friday.
Even at that point, I was like, somebody's got a gun to his head. He was like a brother to me. I mean, he was nicer than my brothers, to be honest.
David was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder. Shock and grief saturated the Rochester community.
This is obviously the shock phase. It's beginning to set in.
It's just, a shock to the whole community. Everyone's talking about it, wondering why.
Come Monday, St. Pius bused students to the funeral.
I remember we had to sit with our class, and there were 4 caskets brought in, of course, all closed. All that I could think of what was on the inside of those caskets. What did the bodies look like? And it was just trauma after trauma, and no help to be found.
Olmsted County Sheriff Kevin Togerson was one of the first responding deputies on scene.
I got up maybe 4, 5, 6 steps, and then I could see 2 sets of feet laying at the top of the steps.
30 years later, in 2018, he spoke with KTTC about the day.
When this happened to the Brom family, there was a very heightened response and involvement, and there was a lot of things going on. The schools were more involved, the school counselors were more involved, trying to help and support families and things like that.
But Price remembers that time in her life differently.
And I remember really people telling us not to talk about it.
It took her until her mid-30s before she felt she could talk about the tragedy publicly.
From age 13, when the murders happened, till age 32, was massively shaped by the murders.
All these years later, she says she's never once blamed David.
Have never had anything but compassion for him and wondered what the reason was. I have written to him a couple times over the years, probably about 6 times.
David is now 49 years old at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Stillwater, and the motive behind his crimes is something he's never revealed.
I think everybody involved with that case asks themselves that question, and I have no answer.
But Price has her own ideas.
Well, I have all sorts of theories on what was happening with David, having to do with priests, to be honest. But David has never been willing to talk about it. He talks about how much he misses his family. He talks about how, he really regrets snapping the way he did, and he talks about how much they loved him, and he very much misses them.
Price is an advocate for mental health and a practicing psychologist here in Rochester. She says if it wasn't for the Brom murders, she wouldn't be as compassionate or even in the same field she's in. She hopes to get the courage to visit David at the Stillwater facility someday. If you'd like to hear more of her interview, head to KTTC.com. And I'll continue our 3-part series tomorrow night looking into a case that haunts parents to this day. Join me tomorrow at 10 for the Jacob Wetterling case and how it has changed missing children cases today.
All right, hello. Let me check.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we are connected for our next review on Mr. Brom. Just wait for everybody to show up here on the screen. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Holmes-Larson, Executive Officer of Hearings and Release in the Supervised Release Board. We're here today to review Mr. David Brom, who is present by video at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Lino Lakes. Mr. Brom also has his advocate and friend, Mr. Paul Welker, present on the screen as well. Here with me at the Minnesota Department of Corrections Central Office is our Commissioner and Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell, along with board members Christine Bray, Cheryl Ramstad, Jody Nelson, Juvenile Expert Member Jody Nelson, Juvenile Expert Member Donald Strufert, Andrew Larson, and we also have our newest board member present by video observing today. Our records indicate that on February 18th, 1988, a deputy of the Olmsted County Sheriff's Department entered the Brom residence. The officer found 4 deceased victims, Bernard, Paulette, Diane, and Richard Brom. The victims had been killed by repeated blows with a heavy, sharp object. A blood-stained axe was found in the home. On February 17th, 1988, Mr. Brom indicated to a friend that he was going to kill his family. On February 18th, 1988, Mr. Brom telephoned another friend and stated that he had killed his family. On October 15th of 1989, David Francis Brom was sentenced to 4 counts of first-degree murder in Olmsted County District Court. Sentence number 1 and 4 remain concurrent, and Mr. Brom was paroled from those sentences on January 16th of 2007. Sentence number 2 started on January 17th of 2007, and Mr. Brom was paroled from this sentence on May 21st of 2022. Mr. Brom is currently serving sentence number 3. This is a 17-year life sentence, and his parole eligibility date was originally September 23rd of 2037. Due to legislation regarding individuals who were juveniles at the time of their offense, Mr. Brom now has the opportunity to be reviewed by the Supervised Release Board after serving a minimum of 30 years. Today's review represents Mr. Brom's second juvenile offense review after serving approximately 36 years of incarceration. This includes his credit of 605 days given by the courts. Given the changes by the legislature regarding juvenile offense cases, Mr. Brom is eligible to be considered for parole as of February 17th, 2018. Thank you. I turn this matter over to the board. Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brom. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
I would like to start out, you've been through this before, start out by asking you to tell the board what it is you'd like to see happen as a result of today's meeting.
I'd like to walk away from today's meeting with an understanding of what a step-down process might look like for me.
Can you talk about your readiness, your journey, what led you to here, and the extent to which and how that in your view, readied you for being considered for parole?
What led me to this point in my life?
Yeah, and your readiness, if you for parole as you've described.
Okay. Yeah. So I've kind of spent my time the best that I can to change the things about my life that led me to the despair and the decisions that I made and the actions that I took, the crimes that I committed. I tried to change everything that I could about myself, and I believe that through the help of staff, programs, the support system I have in my life, I'm a good example of what a transformation can look like in a person's life through the Department of Corrections. I think that I've demonstrated consistency in that progress and in that maturing and growth, and I believe that I'm ready for parole.
So we've had a chance to talk about this in prior hearings, but I think it's, for purposes here, I think it's important. As you know, that the gravity of this offense is immense. Not just the impact on your family, but the community, and as you say, the ripple effect over the course of time. But as you think about, can you help give a sense of understanding of, through the lens of today, what happened that could allow you to engage in the conduct and the taking the lives of your family members, as you look back now through the lens of experience and history and the range of experiences and services that you participate in? How do you understand what you did at that time?
Yeah. First, if I could just take a minute to talk about the effects of the crime on others. I'd just like to apologize to the family and friends of Bernard, Paulette, Diane, and Richard. I caused tremendous loss in their lives, incredible grief and pain, and left them with confusion and unanswered questions. And I apologize for that loss, for that grief, for the murders that I committed and the effect that it had on their life. I'd also like to apologize to the courts, the court officials, the sheriffs, who just as a matter of the service that they provide to their community, that they were a witness to the crimes that I committed. And I apologize for the impact that had on their lives. And lastly, to the neighborhood, to the church we attended, the schools we were enrolled in, and the community of Rochester. I apologize for the ripple effects of losing an entire family in such a horrific way. And to give an idea of what leads a person to commit the murders that I did, I struggled with depression for some time, and it had clouded my thoughts, and it clouded my my ability to process things. And I had grown to a short-sighted view that I thought these things were going to last forever. And I knew I couldn't live that way forever. And in the cloud of depression, I started to believe that other people were at fault for the way I felt. And unfortunately, that fault I placed on my parents and my family, because I was often more depressed at home than I was in other areas of life.
Hey, it's me. I have Brom in here for a comment.
When did when did you first start to get or gain a level of insight or clarity or an understanding of the depression? When did that begin to happen?
I started to understand a little bit about it when I was in the Oaks Treatment Center in Texas. That was a beneficial environment for me. They were supportive and encouraging, and but I really didn't grasp the effect that it was having on my life until it started to kind of dissipate. That cloud started to dissipate in my life as I pursued my faith and as I pursued investments that other people were making in my life, probably closer to my early 20s.
Along the way, were there reconnections that you made with people who were significantly harmed by the offense?
Yeah, I've had connection with several family members, all four of my grandparents, some aunts and uncles, and my older brother. I've also had some contact with a friend of my sister's. So I have had, not all of those have continued, but I have had some interactions with people who were affected by the crimes I committed.
What was that like for you? And as you, especially like as those things were happening or occurring or were about to occur, what was the experience of that? What was that like?
It's always difficult to hear how painfully you've affected someone else's life. And so it was a difficult thing to hear, and to hear how it didn't end. The effects of the crimes didn't end after the funeral or after a short period of time, that they continue to feel the effects of loss and grief. It was also honestly sometimes difficult to hear their acceptance of me into their lives as I struggled to go through the journey of finding a way to forgive and accept myself. It was difficult sometimes to hear their forgiveness and acceptance of me.
As you think about, and I asked that question not to do for any other reason than you've had transition, and what you're seeking from the board is further transition, and all of the things that happen bring something new or different, What do you anticipate, or what would you expect if the board were to move you forward or look at grant parole, whatever the board would choose to do? How do you feel like you would manage or be able to deal with that type of a transition Well, certainly you're not the person you were when you were 16 years old, but nonetheless, the offense is a reality. And how do you think you would manage that?
So, I mean, with any challenge that I face, I believe I have a level of emotional maturity now in order to deal with and recognize what I'm feeling and to work through those emotions. And when that becomes a challenge to me, I have a very strong support system. And so I rely on the advice, counsel, and help of other people that are in my life. And they can usually speak to me in a way that's helpful. And going forward, I also know that I have resources in the community that are available to me that I can reach out to. I'm working with a couple peer recovery specialists and things of that nature. And lastly, I also have, when there's challenges that I face, I'll know I have a parole officer that I can turn to for help, and ultimately other corrections staff that I can turn to for help.
Do you you talked about the desire to talk about like what next steps would look like, and you've done a lot of different work around release planning, and have developed a pretty comprehensive one that we've looked at even prior to this meeting, during your previous meeting. Can you talk about what, just like what if you could write your ticket, what would that look like, and what would a good transition look like to David Brom?
If I could write my ticket, I'm not sure if that's what I would envision the board most likely deciding. I think is a more prudent conversation. But what I would think would be a good outcome would be for the board to tell me about how much time they would like me to serve here in minimum, to continue to show that I can work in the community in the way that I have been, and be productive in the work that I'm doing here and the transition that I'm making here. And then with the idea of possibly moving to a halfway house at some point in time, working at the bridge in the beginning of that halfway house as part of that transition, and then through the halfway house continuing to gain employment outside the bridge, outside the Department of Corrections, and continue to save money and work on building the support system that will make a successful transition into the community on parole.
Thank you for that. I think those are the primary questions I have. Others?
I don't know if this is a question, maybe it is a comment, but what I was struck with, Mr. Brom, in your story was the sense that in the time that you've spent incarcerated, that you not only made it through that experience, but you seem to have thrived in that environment from pretty early on. So many awards, education awards, so many programs completed, PPE, all the thing, the mentoring. You were mentored immediately, and it just really struck me that what you perhaps didn't find in your own home or in school or in your community, you have found in prison. And I think just even as you're talking now, when Commissioner Schnell gave you the opportunity to talk about your vision, and you kind of talked about what's more prudent is what we're going to do. So I think maybe just something for you to think about moving forward is your own efficacy, your own decision-making. I think it's wonderful you've got the relationships and community that you do. And going forward, you'll be the decider at some point of what you're going to do. And just, I don't know, just a thing to have you think about. My background's in therapy and in school-based therapy, and I'm I'm just sorry that your 16-year-old self did not get the treatment for the depression that you were experiencing. So I think you were failed in that regard.
Other questions, thoughts?
I may comment. I'm struck by the phrase, Commissioner, the reality of the offense. As a parent of a murdered daughter, I believe I share or I've had view of that reality. Helpful for me has been a phrase, I got to do it myself, but I can't do it alone. I look for an opportunity to hook up with you, so to speak. What's been your experience of working together with other parents who are grieving because of the offense? Or what's been the experience of us dealing with that in the many opportunities you've taken and created with incarceration? How do we share, or how do we work together to deal with that reality? Bingo. Or how have you found what's working for you?
I really look at a restorative approach to it, a restorative justice approach to it, where I think sometimes just getting together and sharing your experiences and sharing the journey that you've had, the impacts that crime has had on your life, I think that can be an avenue towards healing and transformation in people's lives as they understand that their actions affect more than just their own life. Their actions affect the lives of others. Both positive and negative actions have ripple effects. And so I think sharing those stories, I think is beneficial toward healing.
Where have those opportunities been nurtured within the system? What have been some of the barriers for sharing those opportunities?
Some of the barriers to those opportunities just lie in the nature of incarceration is that you're separated. So there's not always an avenue for contact to be made. It's also difficult. A lot of times there's, and this is entirely up to a victim to have, but there are no contact orders, and sometimes the Department of Corrections wants a person to not have contact with surviving family members of victims. And that's always been an issue that I've addressed when I've been asked to sign paperwork that says I will not have contact with surviving family members of victims. So I can't sign that paperwork because I've been in contact with family members. So that's a challenge in the department. It's also a challenge, to be honest. There's a matter of accountability. That it can be a difficult thing to be accountable for the crimes you've committed, for the way that you've harmed other people. That can be extremely challenging personally to be fully accountable for that.
I understand that to be, or at least I think I face that. What's the criteria you use to assess sufficient accountability? Big question in my mind yet.
For me, I look at accountability kind of one, accountability involves understanding the impacts of your actions, the crimes that you committed, understanding the ripple effects and the people's lives that you've harmed and how you've harmed them. So just one, gaining an understanding of that. I think another aspect of that accountability involves making apologies and doing your best to if you can, repair the harm. And obviously, in my case, that you cannot repair certain harms, but to do your best to provide healing in other circumstances, in other areas where you can, giving back to communities in whatever way that you're able. And then thirdly, for me, accountability also involves recognizing the changes that need to be made in your life, looking at the things that led you to hurt people the way you did, to take the lives that you did, and making the changes in your life that need to be made in order that does not repeat.
I concur, and I appreciate, and I think I've found healing and strength in all of the above as well. I guess I would add one more. I think at times, as you mentioned, there are opportunities or maybe need to change some of the system criteria or policies or opportunities for victim and offenders to dialogue and to meet and to interact. A lot of fear, a lot of unknown, a lot of yet to be determined things are I think, getting in the way is my view. But I appreciate your efforts, and it looks like you've made great success in that along the way, and my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder that the camera is over here.
Just so you know, Mr. Brom, there are screens across from people, and so they may not be looking at you. They're looking at a screen. So just so you're aware.
I appreciated being eye to eye with you and realize you are not eye to eye to me.
Yeah. Can I just ask one question about, you did the clinical pastoral education program, and if you can maybe describe that a little bit, and the peer recovery specialist training, and then what or how those things might apply to your future, whatever that looks like.
The clinical pastoral education was an opportunity to take part in it's a master's level program. It's a chaplain internship, and the class that I participated in involved the teachers, the instructors coming in to the prison in Stillwater, along with 3 or 4 chaplain interns from the community, and then usually 3 or 4 inmates that were also at that point interning as chaplains in the prison. And we would take the classes together and listen to lectures. And the main thrust for me of the clinical pastoral education was just deeply listening to people, and not just listening to respond, but listening to hear the stories that they're telling. And then also listening for, a lot of times there's a lot of tragedy and trauma and hurt that people share in their stories, and listening for the examples of strength and victory over those experiences. And so for me, chaplaincy really involved listening deeply to people. And there was a narrative therapy aspect to it that involved specifically listening for areas of success and ways that you can bring about that awareness that they do have more strength than probably they realize they have. The peer recovery dealt more with, instead of spiritual issues, dealt more with substance use issues. And it had an approach that was similar. They used a thing called motivational interviewing, and it's somewhat similar to narrative therapy, except it involves more active listening and focuses on questions that lead towards change and moving a person towards greater access to change in their life. And the mentorship program in St. Cloud, I'd also like to mention that dealt a lot more with the mental health aspect of things. So I felt like I really had a good, after that program, I really felt like I had a good, well-rounded understanding of how to deal with people in crisis, whether it be through spiritual means, through recovery, or through mental health issues. I felt like it really made me well-rounded in that aspect. And as far as in the community goes, I look forward to an opportunity to connect with either a recovery community organization or a ministry or some nonprofit that deals with people who are in crisis or experiencing hard times, and being able to share the knowledge, the skills that I've gained over those classes with them.
Just last thing for me, I just would just say I appreciate you. I know that the move to St. Cloud was after being in a medium setting. It was a little bit of a shift, and going back, but I really appreciate the role that you played, and the challenge of kind of going back inside to a more close setting, and applying those skills in that setting. So I just want to acknowledge and also the updates that you provided were helpful and useful as well. So thank you for that.
I have a couple of questions, actually. So and some of this is a little bit of a follow-up to one of my colleagues and what she had asked. And so my question is largely kind of framed by like your experience from when you first came into prison at the age of 18 or whatever that was. Like your trajectory does not align with most, meaning came in, you did not see a lot of the disciplinary stuff. I mean, 37 years and you've had one violation for having too many people in your cell, I think is what I had read. That almost makes it harder for me to wrap my head around. So can you, to what do you attribute your success when prior to that you engaged in what in your packet is described as an incomprehensible offense? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense. I think, so first I think that my record does not necessarily reflect the reality of my early incarceration. In the fact that, while I did not have discipline like many people have, I did have a somewhat poor attitude towards a lot of things, and so it demonstrated itself in a lot of times I just passed on opportunities that were available to me because I didn't think it was necessary if I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. So after getting my high school diploma, some of the staff wanted me to go to college because Pell Grants were offered back then. And I really didn't see any point in getting a college degree because I felt like I could get any job in prison without a college degree. And so I did have employment. I was employed. And so, but it doesn't necessarily demonstrate what was going on internally in me. And so I think my record is a little deceptive in that sense because I was struggling when I first came to prison. And it was mostly with hopelessness and some despair. One of the biggest things that did continue to move me towards transformation was my faith, which I encountered early in my sentence. And so that helped me. There were also staff who really invested in me that was an encouragement to not engage in fighting, drinking, drugs, not engage in those activities. There were staff who invested in me. I had friends who were strongly invested in me. I did not want to disappoint my grandparents after I had harmed them so much by continuing in destructive behavior. That was my grandparents visiting me. I didn't want to ever have to explain to them that I was in segregation for doing something that I shouldn't have been doing. And so that was a strong motivator for me as well early in my incarceration.
Have you, I think earlier you had talked about, at the time of the offense that you were really deeply mired in depression. Is that, and I think I had also read that you had gone to I'm assuming a mental health treatment program, I think it was in Texas, or have you had ongoing behavioral health contact, or is it, did the depression just kind of lift and now it's not something you struggle with anymore? Just kind of curious what that has been like for you.
It wasn't an overnight change in my life, but over the course of a few years, the people that came into my life that mentored me really helped challenge me to look at things differently, to challenge some of the thoughts that I had, and not just accept negative views about what my future or what my life could look like. And so over time, it took some work, and some of the tools that I learned in Texas, while I didn't get to complete the work in Texas, some of the tools that I learned there and some of the support that I was given there helped navigate some of the emotions that I had going forward after Texas. So, and I have not had contact with, ongoing contact with behavioral health, other than through some of the programs that I participated in, but not in a counseling session. But early in my 20s, the depression did slowly lift from my life, and I was able to gain a more hopeful attitude towards my future and what life could look like.
Last one for me, and I apologize if I'm reading more into it than maybe I should, but I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. So earlier, when you were kind of giving your opening statement, you indicated that you apologized to the family of, and that's your family. I'm just wondering, should I read anything into that phrasing?
It's so for me, I don't know if there's anything to read into that. I recognize that not everyone in my family would accept me today as family. And so I don't feel like it's appropriate in an apology to say to my family who I've harmed, because they may not be accepting of me as their family.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification.
Mr. Brom, I just want to follow up on some of the mental health issues you experienced early on, and you made a statement that you didn't feel the need to pursue additional support to address your mental health needs since your brother passed away in 2016. Could you talk a little bit about that? Why did that? What was it?
So when my older brother passed away, I felt a great deal of grief, and so I struggled with that grief for a couple of weeks, and I was considering contacting the mental health staff in Stillwater at that time, and my pastor came up to visit with me on that weekend that I was considering reaching out to the mental health staff. And we had a very helpful conversation about grief and loss. And I felt like I turned a page in that experience and in that journey through my conversation with my pastor. That was very helpful. And so after that visit, I didn't feel like it was necessary anymore to reach out to the mental health staff, because I felt like I had gotten what I needed from my conversation with my pastor.
You know, you referenced the time that you spent in Austin, Texas, and the diagnosis you got there. Do you remember the diagnosis they gave you? It was depression. But then it went on to talk about schizoid paranoia and bipolar, things like that. And I think, and I don't know if that came from Texas specifically, it just in the report, it said somewhere along the line, or maybe that's my wording. It didn't specifically say where that diagnosis came from. But in your experience, it sounds like you don't experience voices or any of that. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure early on where those diagnoses came from, because I have not experienced hallucinations or either auditory or visual. And so I'm not sure that the schizophrenic diagnosis is accurate. And the bipolar, I've not experienced those kinds of swings in my mood, so I don't understand where those diagnoses. I'm not certain what factors I had that made them come up with that diagnosis.
Do you think it was when you were at Austin?
There was a period of time early in my incarceration where I went through several different psychological evaluations with different psychiatrists, and I'm guessing that some of them came up with different diagnoses. I don't think my doctor in Texas was focused on evaluating me for diagnosis, but I'm not sure.
Do you see a need for mental health therapy going forward as you step down and leave?
Yeah, I do look forward to an opportunity to have conversations with a counselor as I step down to just help sort out emotions that I might experience, challenges that I might face, just to have another network of support in my life.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
In reading the information provided to me, I think you provided you were seeing it, and you provided a lot of unique interactions, particularly with your, there we go. Hi there. Unique interactions with your fellow inmates. My brief encounter talking with those who are incarcerated, standing out and being more of an individual or having your own sort of notoriety can be a danger as much as a source of strength and pride. And can you talk a little bit about both sides of that? Of starting to being the unique health provider is the words I would use, but what are the blessings? What are the hardship with that?
The blessings is that I get to walk with people as they experience some real tragic moments in their life and provide an opportunity to hold hope out for them. And so that's one of the great honors and benefits of being able to provide some help and healing towards the men that I serve time with. Another benefit is I'm true to myself. I'm true to ultimately how I was raised, and there's something empowering in being who you are and not trying to be fake. And there's something freeing in being who you are. The challenges are, it's heartbreaking to watch other people just continue to destroy their own lives, continue to destroy other people's lives. It's painful to watch people struggle with addiction and mental health and not reach out for assistance and not reach out for any kind of change or progress in their life. There's a challenge in peer pressure to go with the crowd when the culture is about violence and a predatory, violent nature. There's a challenge of dealing with peer pressure there. But all of those things have kind of made me stronger, and I think also in a sense more sensitive to the struggles that I've witnessed other people experience in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to open it up to Mr. Welker. I just want to say thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. And I would just like to open the floor to you to speak to your sense of where Mr. Brom is at and any other thoughts you have for the board.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and appreciate being part of this. Yeah, I was just reflecting and thinking when I first started seeing David, I was 29 years old. I'm 63. I know him. I know him very well. I've seen a lot of growth. He's the finest man I've ever met. He's grown. He's very. He's got a gift of encouragement. I guess I'll say it that way. And it's been a real blessing to be a part of his life and be with him on the journey.
Can you describe just the connection and how this came to be?
Yeah. So David was a friend of another inmate who was incarcerated at the time in St. Cloud, and they were pretty close. And then and I was visiting this other inmate at the time, he got transferred to Faribault, and he thought that it'd be good if I could begin seeing David and encourage Dave in his time. And so that started in, I'm going to say summer of 91. And that's how we got connected. It was through another inmate that I was seeing at the time.
When you say that you witnessed considerable change in him over the course of time, what are some of the notable changes that you did observe in that span of time?
Yeah, well, I think I just saw him grow emotionally. He has learned a lot of skills on how to deal with different emotions, how to identify how actions are coming from those feelings, and those feelings come from thoughts, and those thoughts come from the heart. And so he's learned a lot about who he is, and he's learned a lot about how to identify issues more clearly, get to the root of issues, and deal with those in constructive, positive ways. And over the years, he's gotten really, really good at it and has been able to share that with other people.
Excellent. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Walker?
What do you anticipate, Mr. Welkert, will be your relationship with him from this point forward, should he be released at some point? Should he? What would you anticipate your involvement in his life, and how would you characterize what you anticipate your relationship would be?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. As I understand from David's perspective, he would like the relationship to continue. I would as well. I would anticipate it would. The gentleman I was referring to, who was an inmate that got me connected to David, was released in 1995, and he and I still have a relationship where we get together monthly. And we meet in Wilmer, Minnesota. We walk for a couple hours. We go out and have lunch, and we talk about where we're at in life and how I can be helping. And the mentorship kind of continues there in that relationship. So it's been, I don't know. I started seeing him in '87. So yeah, I'm still in this life 37 years later. I would anticipate a similar route with David, where I would meet regularly with him and be there for him whenever he needs me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'm going to, before I open the, close the discussion and we begin deliberation, I want to just briefly open the floor to you, Mr. Brom, to make any final comments.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and I'm grateful for the questions that you've asked and the thoughts that you've provoked from me, and yeah, I just look forward to hearing the results.
All right. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to close the discussion. During board discussion deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would open the discussion to the board.
I have a question regarding the piece in his release plan about meeting with the sheriff of Olmsted County and the prosecutors. When do you anticipate that happening? While he is still incarcerated to some degree, or once he's out on supervised release?
I've had just the preliminary conversations there, and I think it would be whenever they might be willing to do that. So that would just really be
either or.
It could be either or. It's just something that came up, I think, as a result of the community investigation originally.
I guess I'd like to see Mr. Brom on the track to parole, and I don't know the right language exactly. I mean, he's at Lino, right, minimum right now. So whatever the step down process is, I'd like to. I certainly think he's ready, and like to see that happen. And I don't mean like fast track, like
right,
but. He said earlier, I'd like to know what the path is going to be here, and I'd like to see him on it.
Just for context, so people know that when we had met with him, I met with him just over a year ago or so. Mm-hmm. We implemented that move to St. Cloud, and then I think it was just in December he was transferred back at the minimum, because I had made the commitment at that time that he would go there for a year to work as a mentor and intake units. So he did that. So that's where he's at now. So it's just been, I don't even know if it's a month yet.
Correct. It was 12/3 that he got to minimum.
So just over a month.
And then probably started it not too long after that.
12/3 again, where?
He got to minimum.
At what?
On December.
At
just
Lino
the beginning of December at Lino.
So move, if that is a motion, or I'm ready to go with what the next steps towards release, towards parole. Initiate those in the most expedient way.
Well, clarification, do you mean like move him on from minimum and ICWIC as soon as possible? Because he just got there. So I was struggling with, is it appropriate to, he's only been there a month, to then move him on? I think work release would be the next. So I just want clarity what the motion is.
Keep moving.
Yeah, clarity, he met his mark, the conviction mark as to the end of his sentence. That's been met a number of years ago already, right?
With the law change, yes.
Yeah, with the law change, it was 2018.
Okay. So the next, is there another date ahead of him, or one of our opportunities is to set that date?
We would set that date. That determination. I think the question really becomes, is, this is all over the place, where if you look at step down, what does it look like? How much time would we want him to be a minimum on a ICWIC crew? And I think part of this, and again, I'm not advocating for anything here other than I think part of the reality is, and we didn't ask Mr. Brom about this, but for a lot of people who've been incarcerated for a long time, even just that whole notion of all of a sudden you're cutting grass at a park someplace, for working for some city as on an ICWIC crew, is a kind of a pretty crazy life change when you think about being locked up from, in this case, 16. And so that, and I'm not saying that, if we think about this, do you look at this through the lens of what does he need? I don't know that question. What do we feel comfortable with? I think it's a question of, is there a period of time that you'd like to see him there before he would move to work release? But this is entirely a board decision versus set by the minimum confinement.
Thank you.
I don't have any concern that he needs to stay any amount of time in minimum, given what he's done for 37 years and all the accomplishments and all the growth. I mean, the psychologist talked about notable and substantial growth. So I don't see a benefit of more time incarcerated. At the same time, I think your point, Commissioner, about, okay, this is a crazy change in life now, so I think if there's gradual movement, it's about get used to this. Okay, get used to this, and what does your support need to look like now? What's it need to look like now? But I don't see a benefit in prison programming or any of, like oftentimes we'll say, they need to do more programming. That's not the case here. He's done plenty.
Isn't one of the things that will come with his pursuing this work crew that he'll have access to money that he wouldn't have had before? And I think that given his being incarcerated from such a young age, managing that would be a challenge, would be something you'd have to learn, establishing some community connections. So I would see those steps as being toward his success on the outside, helping to build that. So could I amend the motion to say deny parole, continue him in step down with the goal that he get to work release next, and maybe review, and I guess the question is how much time in his current, I would think 6 months at least before he moves to work release. So I'll put that motion forward.
So let me just make sure so we would be denying parole, continuing him. I'll figure out what that is after, but we have 6 months. You would like to see 6 months in minimum before a transition to work release. Then the question is, I think it's either two questions can be approached either way. How long would you like to see him in work release, or when would the board like to see him come back? because that either way you're going to get to the same end. Do you want them to do a year in work release, 6 months in work release, or do you want to set it out to 18 months and that 6 months in a minimum, or he would actually spend a month there already. So you could, if you wanted to do something odd, do 17. That would be a year, then a work release. So I think these are questions that would have to be refined.
The question I have, or the encouragement I would have in work release, I agree, it's more of the community supports the access to what's happening and that transition into the community. I believe that can be accomplished in 6 months. Or can you get anything more out of that than what's going to be available in 6 months or less? But it's that set up that connection with the community. I think work release then really opens that up. Whereas the minimum is just sort of a good ground to move into work release. So I'd say 6 months, or can you talk a little bit more about the opportunities for community interaction, community exposure?
While he's in work release, you're talking about?
While he's in work release?
I think that really can be somewhat dependent and in terms of things that we would want him to do, but it is intended to be a transition, just another transition. And one of the things that we had talked about when I had seen him a year ago or so, a year over that, was the whole notion that that a lot of people at his age would have had a lot of movements, experiences with transitions, and so that was one of the reasons for even transitioning him back to St. Cloud. And so, that was a part of that thinking. So I guess, in terms of work release, I think we have had, people in work release for long periods of time. Generally, that year is kind of where we don't like to go super longer than that, because that could be really challenging for folks. And we've had people go less than that. And the hard part here is that, we decide this, it's not based upon some measures, right, that the work release staff are looking at. So I think that's, a question. I think, if you were saying do 6 months on work release, and bring them back, that's a and then there could be an evaluation of, does he need to do additional time in that? You could do a paper review, and by paper review, ask work release to submit documentation as to what they see, and then the board could just do that paper review and then decide, do you want to bring them back in the next month or two? I mean, so this is really wide open.
The other opportunity I would hope is, or when would it be available, I guess is my question. He has provided services to other inmates and has been selected and placed at St. Cloud because of his capacities. What capacities or would that be new programs that he could be initiating in minimum now? But he's got a lot to offer. How can those opportunities be available as well?
I think he will. I think just saying, but I think the experience and the record is that he's done that where he's been, and so he would continue. And whatever that looks like in terms of even his description of whether it's some type of chaplaincy or nonprofit work or crisis work. I don't know what the future looks like, but I think it sounds like that's a little bit of the direction he seems to be pursuing. And I think, what that looks like in a work release setting, I don't know. He talked a little bit about bridge, and I think he's got a unique focus. If it's that kind of, the bridge can be a really helpful thing in terms of job search skills and some of those sorts of things. I don't know, given his focus, if that's, the place to go for some of those things. That tends to be much more, focused on, on job search skills and job readiness and yet minimum ICWR can provide some of that.
I think the growth in restorative practice in the state, the Office of Restorative Practice, all the grants that are going out, the advisory, county advisory groups and that are going to provide some terrific opportunities for him. And they're looking for people with lived experience. So,
would there be opportunities for him, since he's now at Lino, to participate in that capacity of mentor for Prison Fellowship Academy?
Yeah, it's harder, a little bit harder when you're on the outside and going in, because that's just tends to be a bit more challenging. Not that it's impossible, but that yeah. And there's a level of, I mean, there are a number of people who come out of prison fellowship that end up in minimum, so there can be a bit of that community connection that just exists more naturally in the minimum setting because of PFA being on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Well, can I amend your motion to say deny parole, continue on the track to parole with a presumptive review in 1 year, thinking he does some more time where he is right now in minimum, and then he goes to work release, and then we review on paper, or he could come back to see if he's ready for parole.
What would be the wishes of the board? Do you want to have him come in and see him and talk to him a year? Or would you want? I'm just by way of the motion here.
Yeah, I'd go with presumptive, but somebody can amend it if they feel strongly.
I would prefer longer if I'm being honest, and I say that not as some sort of arbitrary attempt to, extend the incarceration custodial status any longer than necessary. It's more so, I think the gravity of the change and what those changes represent. I think it's just. And I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't be successful. It's just more time to make sure that there aren't any sort of whatever, hiccups, just adjusting to that ongoing step down. Yeah, I mean, I am just more comfortable with a more with a longer step down. Doesn't need to be 5 years, but something a little bit longer than a year would be my preference. I'm only one board member.
Are you concerned about the Olmsted County community?
Absolutely. That's absolutely a part of it, is the feedback from the law enforcement community, the prosecutor's office, like that. That's a real thing that, even statutorily, like it's one of the factors. So that's a thing for me.
Do you have any sense of what would make you feel more comfortable around that side of it?
A year and a year. A year minimum, a year work release, come back. Come back before the board.
Well, so okay, go ahead.
This gentleman has displayed to me a great capacity for positive change. And I'm much more encouraged about his rate of growth and change and contribution to the community. I'm real concerned about the rate of change among the law enforcement component that prosecuted him originally and their more static response. And I see a lot of opportunities available as gentlemen, opportunities to address to the static response of law enforcement and so forth. I don't see that even available right now. Or he could be one of the persons that might start breaking into that. But boy, that's a big mountain. So I'm saying, look, the opportunities are I don't want him denied opportunities due to the permanence of other attitudes.
Well, can we just do I made a motion, can we just see if it goes anywhere, and then if it doesn't, we start over?
So I just want to make sure, I just want to go back here and just figure out, did we have a motion in a second? I know you talked about it like a motion, but I don't think we had a second, did we?
No. Yeah.
We don't have a second.
Okay. Okay, so your motion then, Don, would be, are you withdrawing it, and then we'll move to Chris's? Is that?
Yeah, I was amending yours.
Yeah, so just instead of, we'll just withdraw it because it was.
It's up to you.
Read the motion. Help me with the motion right now. The motion that we understand. I'm not sure I understand what the motion is. I need to hear it.
Deny parole, continue for 1 year. We'll say with a review at the end of 1 year, where during that time he progresses from minimum to work release.
So a year from now, he could be finished with work release.
It could be.
Is what I'm understanding.
It could be.
And I would go along with that.
And we're talking about bringing, he would come back in
I
for
think,
an
yeah,
in-person
I
review.
think so. Yeah.
Okay, so he basically continued for a year with a period of time spent in minimum, and then moved to work release, and then would be seen in a year, roughly that period of time.
I'll second it.
And there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? The one thing I would just say is, and I say this having come out of spending almost 30 years in law enforcement and working on that side of it, and one of the things that I'm mindful of in this process is that, and I think even Mr. Brom noted this, is that along the way, people who are in the system end up being harmed by exposure to these incidents themselves. And I just will speak to that just on a personal level of spending as many years as I did doing what I did, that's a reality still for me. And part of the objective that I had as a police officer and then police chief was at least the way the system that we have is set up is that success and is grounded oftentimes in system and accountability and punishment. And I'm not seeing this as but that was what it was. And I think it is a weird position even for me personally in some instances to have been on the law enforcement side, even with some cases that I've been involved with in this role. And then on this side of it. And so I just want to say that because I understand where law enforcement and prosecutors can oftentimes be in their response to these cases, and in particular cases that have such a pronounced community impact as well, that I get it. And I don't say that for any other reason but just to provide some context, because
I'd like to add to that one of the things that struck me all along in this experience of 6 months is the trauma, and trauma on all kinds of levels. And I think the vicarious and secondary trauma that police officers and people on the scene and what have you, that I think also impacts their perspective and approach is not, it's not, there's not an awareness of that. And I think I'd like to see us do more about all the trauma.
Bingo. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, just as long as we had the comment section here open.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't think the DOC is in control of this, but that's why I asked the question about sitting down with law enforcement. Not that it would change anything, but that was, I can't remember if that was Mr. Brom's suggestion or somebody else?
It came up during the course of our last hearing.
Is that a possibility in all of this?
We open the door to that those options and go from there. But I think certainly, and I've had this conversation not just in this case, but just I'm talking about in general, where I've invited colleagues of mine from the police chief side and sheriffs to come in and participate in some of these conversations, and that's been helpful. Oftentimes, it's not a case that they were necessarily involved in, but we met with people who, were part of the circle that, we heard of earlier in our conversation with Mr. Spann. We hear about with Mr. Brom, some of these folks who create that community that is very positive and wanting to move forward. And I think, those things need to continue because I think that's, it is one of the places that can be eye-opening. And I think it doesn't open a trauma door that, where people were directly involved in a case.
Well, could we proceed with the motion? I suspect it may get voted down and then somebody can make a new one.
Okay, so we have a motion, and to that motion, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Earhart abstains. Board Member Larson.
No.
Board Member Ramstead.
Yes.
Board Member Nelson.
Yes.
Board Member Struford.
Yes.
And Schnell will vote yes. We have by a vote of 5-1, one abstention, the motion prevails. Mr. Brom, we will work with the staff there in terms of identifying kind of a timeline of what this looks like. We'll work with work release staff as well. Probably just if we look at, cutting this in half, you'd be looking at another, maybe it's 5 months there. We'll work with work release, and HRU will connect with Dan there and begin to work out a plan for that. And then we'd be seeing you sometime likely in January of next year. Any questions about that?
No.
Obviously, the standard expectations, remain discipline-free, which hasn't been a big problem, other than that one time when you had an extra person in your cell, as was noted. And then, again, I would just say that, and you and I have talked about this, and I think the issue of, what we expect and what you owe us to continue to do what you're doing in terms of investments in self, living your best life, and the ways that can affect others. So we would certainly hope that and expect that will continue. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. And Mr. Welker, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, our last review that we have scheduled, does anybody need a quick break, or are we good to go into the file review? This is a non-appearance file review.
Question, history, how, is this done any differently when the person is not there, or any procedure or process changes? It's I think it's new for me. But
there is really not much of a difference. We provide that opportunity, that there was the waiver in this case, and then we really are just looking at, it's a paper file review, and then what is it that we would like to see put in place, if whatever that looks like, and go from there.
Introduction for those who are listening.
Yep.
All right, so give us some basis. Good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Holmes-Larson, Executive Officer of Hearings and Release and the Supervised Release Board. We're here today to review Mr. Jordan McCutson, who has signed a waiver of non-appearance and chosen not to participate in his review today. Here with me at the Minnesota Department of Corrections Central Office is our Commissioner and Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell, along with board members Christine Gray, member Andrew Larson, member Cheryl Ramstad, juvenile expert member Jody Nelson, juvenile expert member Don Struford, and we also have our newest board member, Ms. Joe Earhart, observing by video today. Our records indicate that on June 9th, 2006, in Duluth, Minnesota, Mr. Metaxen and an accomplice walked up behind a man who had just left a liquor store carrying a 12-pack of beer. They knocked him to the ground and stomped and kicked him to death, then took the beer and the victim's wallet. The victim, Donald O'Brien, was transported to the hospital where he died the following evening due to his injuries. On November 2nd of 2006, Jordan Michael Metaxen was sentenced to 40 years for murder second degree in St. Louis County District Court. Due to new legislation regarding individuals who were juveniles at the time of their offense, Mr. Metaxen now has the opportunity to be reviewed by the Supervised Release Board after serving a minimum of 15 years. Today's review represents his initial review after serving approximately 18 years of incarceration. His confinement release date was originally July 26th of 2034. Given the changes by the legislature regarding juvenile cases, Mr. Metaxen is eligible to be considered for release as of June 7th of 2021. It should also be noted that Mr. Metaxen also has a consecutive sentence of 15 months in which he received 90 days of credit for time served for fourth degree assault on a correctional officer. Thank you, and I'll turn this matter over to the board.
So as was mentioned, Ms. Metaxen is not going to be here. We do have in front of us, the record, as I recall, he did not participate in the comprehensive risk assessment process either. So what we have is one that was completed without really on a file review. I think Mr. Metaxen has a extensive kind of history of disciplinary issues, and he actually, I think in some places described or told case manager, I believe, just some of the challenges that he's had because of, in part, the length of the amount of time that he has spent in segregation and over the course of time, and an apparent interest, considerable interest in tattooing, I guess. Some of the stuff that he's been involved in more recently, but he did have previously, as was noted by the offense, some involvement in violent behavior, and some of that, one of that at least, was a staff assault, serious staff assault. He has not done much. And I would say that, generally speaking, and this is just Paul Schnell speaking. When I was doing these cases myself, and previously with advice and counsel of the advisory council, I would oftentimes set a fairly lengthy term of continuance, and then also provide an off-ramp for that thing. So maybe it's 6-8 years, but we would see you in 2 or 3 if you do X, Y, or Z. Demonstrate some positive movement so that there is both an opportunity for him to have an off-ramp to do that, and yet if you don't, and you're not going to have the chance really to come back unless you demonstrate something. So that has been at least some of the approach I've tried to do, and for some people that has worked. Mm-hmm. For other people, it's just, I'll just sit for my whatever period of the continuance is, and fine. But for a number of them, it was like, okay, I'm going to do something and get back in to see him.
Well, on the off-ramp, I assume part of it would be CD treatment. That seems to be a big deal. Yeah. What does the 50 points mean? I mean, I get level 5. What is 50 points? Is that an indication of discipline, sort of, or?
Yeah, I can't give you the details of everything included.
Yeah,
it's
but that's
cumulative.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's a high score.
That's why he's still at Oak Park.
Oak Park,
Okay. He's at close.
His classification level is just that.
Yeah. He has to accomplish some programming and things.
So that's got to be accessible. I mean, it's got to be accessible to him. I mean, it's programming. You definitely got to do more. I think of kind of the risk column and the protective factor column, and I was impressed with his cultural. I mean, it didn't get talked about hardly at all until at the end when you're with the grandmother and all that, but that he's a grass dancer, that he went to Dubai to dance. He's had these other like remarkable experiences and connection to culture that I think can be a protective factor as part of the, and then the tattooing isn't just tattooing, that he's like a skilled artist.
Correct, yeah.
And that there's been some of his art that's in whatever out there. So I think, continuing to invest in the positive pro-social things that he has available to him, while, clearly addiction is the thing, and that's got to be, had that not been the case, he'd be in a different place. So, I think time, but just like you talked about, Commissioner, and where's the hook, where's the hope, and yet you got a lot to do here, dude.
Yeah, because he's, right. If he doesn't do anything, he's got 10 years plus. He's got that another 8 months, almost a year to do. So
yeah, and then he's got support from family. There's some of that stuff
Yeah.
too. He's got some stuff, but he's got more work to do.
So I'll make a motion, no parole, continue for 5 years. See if anything, or maybe 5 is too short for the off-ramp.
what if
Maybe, go ahead.
like what if it was 8 years?
Yeah, I was just going to say 8
And
years.
then
But
do it. One of the things that we try to do is keep the off ramp relatively short, so that, because again, it doesn't change. It just means they're coming back, right? And then because that way there's some incremental opportunities for interventions. So if he were to do substance use disorder treatment, as a for instance, in the next 2 years or something like that, and then came back, all he's doing is coming back. He's not getting released, but it might be now we move you to this, or you get whatever different experiences.
Well, and to your point, I think it's trying to find that balance where it's close enough that it has meaning.
Right.
Because if it doesn't, then it's pointless.
Yeah, it feels like it's never going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
okay, so a motion to continue for 8 years with the conditions that he get into treatment, and upon completion could be seen sooner. I don't know if we need to specify that or not.
It's easier to do if we say, like, we're going to with the off ramp is 2 years, because his treatment's going to be he's not going to be an outpatient level treatment. He's and part of. So he would probably be a max treatment guy, and that's a long program. Like, it can be 11 months, because there's cog skills in there. There's all kinds of stuff depending upon where he goes. He'd probably end up in close.
He would most likely. He still has to earn his step down out of Oak Park.
Get out of
before he can get into said treatment. So just keep that in mind. And the treatment is probably going to take him 11 months. if he does well the whole time and stays discipline free. And so he's going to need a few months to step down out of Stillwater, I would imagine.
Go to Stillwater?
Or Oak Park, excuse me.
Go to Stillwater?
Or wherever the assessors determine the best treatment program
where
is.
the tattoo program is at.
Yeah, that's
Would that
where
be a carrot in the future?
it could be in the future. I think that could be part of it if he were to be looked at, to go to treatment over there for Atlantis, something like that at Stillwater, which would be the more natural move from max to close custody.
Just to recognize the talent in that, we see that you've got talent.
Yeah, I think he may be doing some stuff with art from the inside.
Nice.
As well. So,
do you think that talent or what that opens for him, or he's open to that? My big concern is who can he sit down with that he can listen to and that he'll accept or even understand what the steps are. How do you get information to this man is sort of a blank for me right now. Dancing maybe has been, but where do you connect right now, or who can connect with him right now is my
right now it's his caseworker. So when the caseworker hears what the board decides, then the caseworker works with the other facility, the other staff at their facility to help him step down and get to where he needs to go to meet his goals.
And Don, are you asking like someone to try to, for lack of a better way of putting it, to get through to him, kind of start to enhance some of that motivation? I think if I read, or if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's the grandmother and
uncle,
whatever that, like they have some background in SUD and maybe a long time sober, so really encouraging that relationship and not knowing what that dynamic is like. I thought maybe she was on the visiting list, but
She was.
Okay,
It was
so
a really good letter from Victor. Victor makes room for them. And I wondered who Victor was and if he was part of a tribe and if that person could be helpful.
Well, there's the uncle. I think the uncle is a professor in South Dakota.
That's
so
the uncle.
Really encouraging that. Certainly, I think he does have opportunities for pro-social supports in the community and really pushing on that. I think he's gotten just trapped in the prison culture and is having a hard time seeing the forest through the trees.
Like you might just be starting to see that.
I too got that impression that he may be starting to see that. So maybe there is some reason for
how to keep
him moving in that direction.
Yeah. I thought I was impressed with Mr. Brom when he talked about staff who made a difference in his early on that staff were there for him. So both of those. Is it possible to reach out to the family to say, we really see you guys as being able to...
The caseworker can do that.
Caseworker can?
The caseworker can have conversations with them. Where's your best relationship? What your cultural support and sober sobriety support?
And even reach out to some of these folks who wrote on his behalf and just say, hey, we really want, the board would really like to move him in a place where they see some of that progress, but any encouragement and motivation that you can help provide would be really helpful. All right, so I think we have. So you didn't say this, but we have a motion of doing deny parole 8 years with a off ramp, and would you be comfortable with us specifying at least 18 to 2 years?
Yeah, I was going to say 2 years.
That's really, because it's going to take some time to step him down first to get him out of here. So if we do 2 years and then he knows that there's a there's a fork in the road here that can come as early as 2 years. And some things that we'd like to see them try to do. And we can certainly try and build out, even things like art from the inside, which, has been working with a lot of these guys and women, and they're taking their art all over the state. And I don't know did they say which tribe he was?
Dakota.
Is Dakota. Anyway, so we have a
criteria for the off-ramp then would be, is it completion?
Yeah, a successful completion of substance use disorder treatment.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
How about the discipline-free, given the fact
He won't finish treatment unless he is.
Oh, okay, so it's incorporated.
Yeah.
Point of information, if, say, he completes the CD treatment within a year, is there any vehicle available to him to request a review prior to, 18 months or 2 years?
2 years. The challenge is going to be, I think, with the fact that I think he's in restrictive housing now. Will have to work his way through that. There's step down relative to moving through that. As a general practice, we would not override that discipline that's been imposed. That he had to have to serve that out and finish that and then do this. But I hear, and I always get concerned because it shapes people's view, and spending that much time in restrictive housing is not a healthy place to be, and it limits. One of the things that we've been really focused a lot on agency-wide is how do you make sure that we know what programs actually reduce a person's points, and so doing COG skills is going to reduce his points.
Well, that's the deal with the points.
That
how much
really,
or how little.
Yeah, so
you do
it's
with it.
how little, or your disciplinary history, your level of assaultiveness, compliance, program completions, being able to manage a work assignment. All of those things really contribute to a person's points. So all positive things reduce, visiting. Having people come in from the outside to visit. Well, you don't have that when you, are in restrictive housing. Access to programs become more challenging while you're inside. So it's all these things that actually make it hard to reduce your points if you're in there. So I think those are some of the things that, I think it would be unlikely. I think, we certainly would encourage them to be as positive in terms of trying to encourage that and engage maybe family who have written letters of support. But it would be unlikely that between getting him moved, because he's going to have to go to another facility to do SUD. I don't think we would see him much before 20 months, just to be honest. I think that would be hard. So, okay, we have a motion and a second by roll call vote. Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Earhart abstains. Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Ramstad.
Yes.
Board Member Nelson.
Yes.
Board Member Strufert.
Yes.
And Schnell votes yes. It's unanimous vote. The motion prevails. We'll communicate that with him.
Seconded. Sorry.
Did we have we had a motion?
First made the motion. It's a second. Sorry.
Did we have a second? Okay. Done. Yeah.
He meant to second.
He meant
Yeah,
second,
that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
Looking at the wrong camera still.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've taken care of the other business around the meeting minutes. Is there anybody signed up for public comment? No public comment. The next full meeting of the Supervised Release Board is January 28th, 25, starting at 11:15. It will be here. And with that, I would entertain an non-debatable motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And a second? And we are adjourned.
Didn't miss that one.
Tuesday meeting will be in this room, the 14th, for those of you who can come, meeting training.